Each of us is called to grow the Lasallian dream. And today we have the opportunity to hear about that vision and concrete ways it is being lived out. My name is Sarah Leighton, and I'm happy to host this webinar from Christian Brothers Conference, the Office for the Lasallian region of North America. We're grateful you are taking time from your full schedule to join us today. It's a blessing to have so many Lasallians joining us from all across the country and internationally as well. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. The chat section of Zoom is open. We encourage you to leave your comments there throughout today's webinar and chat with one another. You can leave your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom, and Kurt will be responding to them during the session. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our Lasallian Resource Center website, lasallianresources.org. We will provide a copy via the email address you provided at registration once the video link becomes available. Today, we're so excited and we're so privileged to have three voices offering their unique insights and perspectives to us. First, it is a pleasure to introduce Dr. Kurt Schackmuth, Chief Mission Officer and Vice President for Student Life at Lewis University in Romeoville, Illinois. Kurt holds a PhD in higher education from Loyola University Chicago and earned both an MBA and a bachelor's degree in history from Lewis University. In addition to his work at Lewis, Kurt has served the Midwest District, Region, and Institute in a variety of capacities during the past 27 years, including as a member and chair of the Lasallian Education Council and as a formator in the Brother John Johnston Institute. Especially pertinent to today's conversation, in October 2023, Brother Superior General Armin Laristro appointed Kurt to a 3-year term as the RELAN delegate to the International Council for Lasallian Association and Educational Mission. CML is one of the 3 councils that compromises the Institute's new governance structure. Also giving voice to the lived experiences in RELAN are Brother Dylan Perry, who currently has the pleasure to serve as principal at De La Salle Blackfeet School in Browning, Montana. Brother is originally from Memphis, Tennessee, and a graduate of Christian Brothers High School and Christian Brothers University. He holds a master's in public service from the University of Arkansas's Clinton School. We're very blessed to have with us Juan Escafouye, who currently serves as Executive Director of Instituto Fe y Vida and ministers to train the next generation of Latinos to lead in the church and society. Juan was born and raised in the Dominican Republic until his family immigrated to New Orleans at age 7. Inspired by Catholic social teaching, he is committed to do justice work with immigrants and their U.S.-born Spanglish-speaking children. Welcome to each of you this afternoon and evening. Before I turn it over to Kurt, we're going to begin with a brief prayer that centers on the life and legacy of Blessed James Miller, who we'd propose as an icon of the Leavening movement, and whose example in his ministry to Indigenous young people was a bridge person, modeling a life centered on the dignity of others, working toward justice and social change, and protecting the vulnerable, especially those young people in Guatemala who were being taken from their families by the government. This life of Brother James ultimately led to his martyrdom and the challenge for each of us to continue his work, educating with dignity and bringing our full selves to the ministry we are entrusted and with those we are called to walk with. Might his patronage and intercession be invoked today and in the days ahead as we seek out new ways to live out our Lasallian dream. And so let us remember that we are in the holy presence of God.
In Brother James, we see a witness of small transformative actions that can have significant impact on the world. Lord, be leaven in me and give me the strength to act, even in seemingly small ways.
In Brother James, we see a witness of being sent to meet God in people and promote justice. Lord, be leaven in me and open my heart to your presence in the marginalized.
In Brother James, we see a witness of asking, where is your brother? Where is your sister? Lord, be leaven in me and help me to see those on the peripheries, those forgotten and cast aside.
In Brother James, we see a witness of recognizing that people on the peripheries are the starting place. Lord, be leaven in me and guide me to walk alongside them, to learn from their experiences.
In Brother James, we see a witness of prophetic audacity, solidarity, interiority, encounter. Lord, be leaven in me and fill me with your spirit, that I may be courageous and compassionate.
In Brother James, we see a witness of drawing from within, courage and commitment to his convictions. Lord, be leaven in me and deepen my faith, that I may live out the gospel message with boldness.
St. John Baptist de La Salle, pray
Pray
for
for
us.
us.
Blessed James Miller, pray
Pray
for
for
us.
us.
Live Jesus in our hearts forever.
Well, good afternoon or good evening to all of you. Thank you for setting some time aside on your Wednesday evening to join Juan, Dylan, and Sarah and I for a session that will help to contextualize and introduce the Leavening Project or Leavening Movement. We're going to say a little bit about the Leavening Movement, what it's about, what it means, why it's significant today. And then as part of our webinar, we'll also be sharing some case studies and inspiration that I think will really give those of us in RELAN a sense of the important work that is happening in an effort to move the leavening movement forward in a vital and significant ways. I know that I have been very eager to participate in the webinar today, and I'm really grateful to Juan and Dylan who have joined me. One reason that I'm excited that the webinar is happening this evening is that my hope is that all of the social media with my picture will finally go away. Because every time I plug into the internet, every time I open up my laptop, I see my picture, and it's very disconcerting. So I'm really excited about doing this webinar tonight, and I hope you're happy to be with us to learn a little bit more about the Leavening Project. So on to our first slide here. The Leavening Project was introduced in January 2023 as a document published by the General Council in Rome. And it was really the product that emerged from the first meeting of Brother Armin and the General Council when they met in Bogota shortly after the general chapter, the 46th general chapter concluded. And it was during this gathering of the General Council that the brothers said, how can we unify the Lasallian family with the same themes and the spirit that emerged from the 46th general chapter that really invigorated and renewed their sense of mission and where the Institute needed to go. And so the Leavening Project document was really a product of the need to bring the Lasallian family along and make sure that they were experiencing and feeling the energy that came from the gathering of the 46th general chapter that previous May. And if you followed along with the developments of the general chapter, if you were there perhaps at the general chapter, it very much reflected so much of what Pope Francis has been saying to us for some time now. And in many ways, I gave the general chapter my own little kind of title of it was a Pope Francis general chapter, and that it reflected a call to the peripheries. It reflected a synodal approach to the work that needs to be done within the Institute. And it was the kind of experience that I understand was very inspiring for all those who participated. And so the Leavening Project itself was designed to really bring that spirit forward. I will say, though, and I know this was a reflection that many other people had as well, that we were somewhat confused when the document first came out. I remember at the time I was on the Lasallian Education Council, and we were looking at the document for the first time, and we were somewhat perplexed because the title had thrown us off. And something we've learned since the document was published was that the word project was kind of a point of contention in terms of language, because uh, in America, when you talk about a project, North America at least, when you talk about a project, we tend to think of timelines and deadlines and action items and accomplishments and goals, and it has kind of a beginning and an end. And what we learned as we talked more with members of the General Council and we reflected on the document more with larger groups of people is that this was really a product of translation. And so in reality, what we're talking about is a movement, a philosophy, an approach. And so you'll hear oftentimes we'll refer to the Leavening Project as the Leavening Movement, which I think in terms of an English translation is a little bit more consistent with what the General Council was trying to convey when they wrote the document. And so Leavening Project, Leavening Movement, synonymous. However, I think Leavening Movement is a little bit more accurate. On to our next slide, Sarah. Thank you. So here are a handful of key messages of the Leavening Project. If you haven't had a chance to read this document, it is worth your time. It won't take you long at all. It's a really wonderful reflection on gospel passages as well as messages that I think can really inspire us. First, it's an invitation to immediate action. It was almost as if the General Council knew that when they published this document, many of us would go into strategic planning mode, and we would spend all kinds of time creating big, elaborate structures and spend a lot of time thinking about this work. And what they say very early on is that this is not about spending too much time overthinking what it means to be leaven in the world, to go to the peripheries. Instead, they call us to go to immediate action, to step into the fray and start making a difference in our Lasallian world. It is also about grassroots empowerment. The metaphor, the icon of the leaven was very intentionally chosen as a small ingredient with remarkable power, right? So leaven, yeast is so important in the baking process, and without it, the baking process just doesn't work. And so the General Council is saying that we are the small ingredients that need to go out and do remarkable things as leaven, as a catalyst. It's also very inclusive and focused on collaboration, which of course really reflects the synodal approach to decision making and conversation that has become very synonymous now with the way the Catholic Church is starting to do its thinking. And so this isn't about one ministry only by itself going out and doing things to make a difference, but we're also encouraged, in addition to doing things as individuals, we're encouraged to go out and collaborate with others and as a Lasallian family to make a difference, to go out and move to the peripheries to see where there are needs and make small steps to make a difference. I think one of the most significant aspects of the Leavening Project document is this call to move out of our comfort zones. It is so easy to stay in our ministries doing our thing getting caught in kind of the cycle of being an administrator or a teacher or a support staff person or a president or a principal, and to not see what's going on in the Lasallian world around us. And our ministries and our institutions are so diverse. Some of us are positioned in organizations and ministries that are in wealthier parts of the world. Others are in rural areas. Some are in poor areas, and many scattered all across the continuum in between. And so the document really calls us to get out of our comfort zones, not just to go to the peripheries, to go where there are significant needs, but also to be leaven. And so we're challenged to do two things. We're challenged to go someplace, and we're challenged to be something different than maybe we're used to being. And so this can be a challenge. It's not necessarily easy for all of us to think this way, to think outside the box, and to behave this way. And the document is really good at challenging us to do that. And then finally, the Leavening Project is really consistent with the Institute's new governance structure. And so Brother Alfonso, the Secretary General, said in a meeting recently about the Leavening Project that its goal is around aligning, integrating, and implementing our commitments to the peripheries at local, regional, and global levels. And so the leavening movement is not just some side project. It is actually part of the work that the three institute governance councils are trying to move forward in their formalized roles. And that is very significant, because what it says to me is that the Leavening Project isn't simply this passing fad that we're going to think about for a few months and then it's going to go away. This is structural, this is integrated, this is essential. And so as we think about doing this leavening movement, leavening project work, we need to think about how it's being integrated into everything that we do, because it is inherently valuable to what we do as Lasallians, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to quickly mention that the brother visitors throughout the world were invited to share examples of leavening movement ministries or projects in their regions that they wanted to hold up as exemplars, as projects that really exemplified the spirit of the leavening movement. And these are, for the most part, fairly formal. And if you happen to be in Rome, next slide, Sarah, you'll see this poster that is displayed in one of the hallways, and it lists all 28 of the leavening movement projects scattered across the Lasallian global network. And because we're talking about RELAN today, you can see that there are 4 that our visitors in RELAN have named as kind of exemplars of the leavening movement in this region. And we're grateful, of course, to have Brother Dylan with us, who represents one of those ministries. Although I think we need to help them spell Browning in Rome, because they seem to have forgotten the B in that poster. But I think that's an easy fix, right, Dylan? So before I introduce Dylan to share a little bit about what is going on at Browning, I do want to pose a question to all of you to give some thought to as you participate in the remaining portion of our webinar tonight, which is, what does it look like to be leaven in a complex, changing environment? So if you have any thoughts, think about them, jot them into the chat, and it would be great to hear what you think about what it looks like to be leaven, to be yeast, to be a catalyst, to be a difference maker in what is certainly a complex and changing environment in RELAN right now. Okay, so as you give some thought to that, I am going to ask Brother Dylan to share a little bit about his experience of the leavening movement in our region. Brother Dylan.
Thank you, Kurt, and thanks everyone for being here. It's a privilege to talk to you today about the story, mission, and transformative impact of De La Salle Blackfeet School and how we're participating in the Leavening movement. I'm going to try to work off a script, which is a little off out of my norm. So if I'm not as funny as I normally am, then I apologize. But I want to try to keep to time and honor everyone's time here. So here at De La Salle, we're more than just a school. We are a community, a family, and a place of hope for young people on the Blackfeet Reservation. We strive to serve our students in ways that honor their heritage and empowers their future. And in this, we embrace the essence of the Leavening movement, really have for the 25 years of existence before Leavening movement was a term, bringing forth growth, renewal, and transformation through our ministry. At the heart of our mission is our commitment to walking with students and families. We strive to see the face of Creator God in each of them, in one another, and all the work that we do. And as Leaven community, in our community, we uplift the unique gifts and abilities of each of our students, embracing different ways of learning to help them reach their potential. We believe that having choice is essential in education, especially for an active role for our families. But we're the only one of two private schools and the only faith-based school in the 1.5 million acres of the Blackfeet Reservation. So we are the reservation is the size of the state of Delaware and nestled up against the mountains and along the Canadian border, to give you guys some perspective. So we're about 2 to 3 hours away from what you might call a small city. Most people in our urban areas would just call a town. We have a little town of 5,000 here that we're situated in. Our eighth grade, by eighth grade, our students are brought up nearly to the grade level in math and reading, although they start out on average with us 3 to 4 grade levels behind. Some of our incoming fourth graders are often unable to recognize letters or able to read, even though they have been through the public school system before coming to us. But in addition to academic success, our students are impacted by many historical traumas and modern epidemics, such as suicide and opioid addiction, that are huge problems on the reservation. And so social emotional learning is a huge part of our work as well. In the midst of all this, we hope to empower our students to revitalize their culture and to reclaim the use of the Blackfeet language. Because of this, our work extends well beyond the classroom. We work to be bridge builders, bringing together the Blackfeet, Lasallian, and Catholic communities in a shared vision of faith and justice. And like Leaven, we work quietly, transforming and enriching the lives of our students and their families. We educate not only our students, but other stakeholders, and working to confront the traumas of colonization and to build a future where all people are valued and respected. This is not easy in the remote and rural context that we exist in. Next slide, please. So we're assisted in that effort by bringing folks to us that we can educate and that can help us in our work. One of the most transformative aspects of our ministry is the Okini Sukawa, the Blackfeet Immersion Program, which means come and see in Blackfeet. Each year, we welcome groups from across the country who come to experience the richness of Blackfeet culture, serve alongside our students, and build relationships that last a lifetime. In line with the Leavening movement, this program fosters encounters that rise above barriers, creating space for mutual learning and deep connection. This past year alone, we hosted 36 groups, staying for a week at a time, each one contributing in meaningful ways, whether working with students, assisting in school and parish projects, or simply learning about life on the reservation. And since its inception, since in 2003, more than 3,500 individuals have participated in this experience, many of whom have carried forward the Leavening spirit in their own ministries and communities. And so the school has only existed for 2 years without this program. It's an integral part of our contribution to the community and our participation in the Lasallian family. Next slide, please. Another important part of our ministry is the Holy Family Mission community. The Brothers community exists outside of town on an old Jesuit mission That is really the heart of the school's ministry. It's a place of faith, service, and hospitality, and currently home to 3 brothers, 2 volunteer teachers, and countless short-term volunteers and visitors, as well as the bunkhouse where the immersion students stay. So really, these immersion students from the Blackfeet immersion program really become part of our community, and change out every week, but become a part of who we are. And this community witnesses to the power of faith and service, rising together to bring hope and renewal to our Blackfeet people. Our community strives to be a beacon of light, carrying Christ's love through daily acts of love and commitment to our ministry, to our neighbors, and to the broader community. We only have 1 priest on the reservation, again, the size of Delaware. So the brothers and our community also become an important part of the Catholic family, the Catholic community throughout the reservation. Next slide, please. So as I said before, I think we strive to be a place of hope and encounter. De La Salle Blackfeet School is a place where hope comes to life. We like to say our tagline is putting faith in education. And here we're called to be leaven, to lift each other up, to create something bigger than ourselves. It's a place where we meet people, learn from each other, and leave changed for the better. Our ministry is about shifting perspectives, opening hearts, and creating real relationships for healing and reconciliation. In my opinion, that's what the Leavening movement is about, making an impact that keeps growing and spreading and multiplying in unexpected ways, simply by being faithful to our call. This happens often through hospitality, which I think is at the core of who we are as Lasallians. We don't just open doors, we open our hearts. There's a lot of pain in our community and all communities that have been marginalized. And I believe that the Leavening spirit can help us to break that cycle of pain by being there for people, teaching others to see and be there for people. I invite all of you to consider how we do this, how we bring this fraternal love and hospitality to the world. Consider how we're making spaces for meaningful encounter. How are we being people who truly see and hear one another? How are we spreading hope and healing wherever we go? How are we making sure that everyone who walks through our doors feels at home? Next slide. So a few practical takeaways and lessons learned. It's my belief that holiness is contagious. It spreads to whoever we touch with it. So think about how we're getting involved, and encourage you in the context of our ministry specifically, to educate yourself about Native communities, especially Native communities near you, their histories, and how to advocate for justice for them. Support movements like the Orange Shirt Day movement that acknowledges the impact of residential schools, especially as Catholics, that we acknowledge the part that we played in colonizing Indigenous peoples, and honor Indigenous communities through things like land acknowledgements and advocacy. I also encourage you to think about how across the region we're involving ourselves in immersive pedagogical experiences. Certainly ours with Okinisukawa, but programs like El Otro Lado, the Brother David Darsh Center, that provide experiences for encounter, which I think is important to the Leavening movement. And personally, consider how you bring a spirit of encounter to each interaction that you have. I put this picture up here because I wanted to remind us not to take ourselves too seriously. I let my faculty tape me to a wall. I forget why even now, but it's so important to open yourself up, to not take yourself too seriously, and be open to being impacted by others. I think that's an important part of this movement. And by doing these things, we can be leaven and stir transformation in ourselves and in everyone we meet. So this concept of leaven is a movement of encounter and transformation. I invite you to come and see yourself. Walk together, learn together, let the journey change you. And together we can create a future where education heals, faith brings us together, and every child knows that they're valued. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Dylan. Juan.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Brother Dylan. Instituto Fe y Vida, these are images that you see from our formation work. We offer formation programs for young Latinos, both teenagers and young adults. From a faith perspective, how do we develop leaders, and not just for church ministry, but leaders for all sectors of society? So a lot of our work, and this will resonate with what Brother Dylan just presented and what Kurt presented about the Leavening movement, is about providing for many of these young people for the first time tools of theological reflection. Theological reflection that is not just about accepting intellectually, the teachings of the church, but it's about see, judge, act, or as we say, see, discern, act. And part of that seeing part for these young people is the first time when they come here to the Lewis campus. This is from the formation program over the summer there at Lewis, that they have a space to name their reality, and name the reality not just in terms of mainstream culture, but the reality at home. What are they living? What are they living also with their peers? What are they living at school? What are they living, in terms of the relationship with their parents? Many of these young people have jobs, so what are they living in terms of the relationships in their workplace? And from there, so Lasallian of us, when we look at human development, we bring in perspective of faith. How does faith help to bring a sense of order? What is right? What is wrong? What cries out for justice and action? And then what do you do about that, right? It's similar to maybe the transfiguration of Jesus. Peter wanted to set up shop and maybe charge tickets and live a nice life up there on the mountain, but Jesus says, no, we got to go to Jerusalem. We got to do the hard work of, now that we've seen the light, how do we transform this, not just for ourselves, but also for others in the community? Next slide, please. Thank you, Sarah. So it's a few things about Instituto Fe y Vida for those of you who are new to our work and how it fits within this Leavening movement framework. So the brothers in the Midwest District in 1994 were discerning, who are the impoverished, who are the vulnerable youth in our midst. I'm struck that Brother James Miller, who we invoked in the prayer today, is, as you mentioned, Sarah, a bridge builder. We say in Spanish, a gente puente, literally a bridge builder. And what the brothers discerned is we need to build a bridge to the growing number of Latino youth. One, because of immigration, but also because many of these immigrants, having settled in the U.S., who's attending to the needs of their children. And so in 1994, Instituto Fe y Vida was started with a huge investment by the brothers in the Midwest District. Many of the first members of the team had been working at St. Mary's Press and helped to enculturate the commentaries that you see in the Catholic Youth Bible, a great youth Bible that's used throughout the U.S. Since then, we focus on formation, leadership formation, faith-based leadership formation, and we have 13,000 alums, young Latinos who have gone through the formation and are either currently working or did work in at least 140 of the 144 dioceses in the United States. So this ministry, though, I love how you mentioned, Kurt, leaven is something that's not necessarily seen, but you see the effects and you see the ripple effects. If you know about baking, a little bit of leaven has an amazing effect, and we see that in terms of the numbers and the reach that we've had. Right now, working with young people, especially among digital natives, we also have a social media presence, and we've got 1.4 million followers. We have the largest Catholic Facebook page in the Americas. Someone told me recently, well, in the US, young people no longer do Facebook. But when you go beyond the border, across the Americas, young people still are using Facebook as a huge tool. And we happen to have Fabi that has the largest Facebook page, Catholic, and our focus there is the Catholic Youth Bible in Spanish. So just to give you a little bit of how we've tried to differentiate the ministry and break new ground in terms of how we minister to young people. A lot of people might say, "Oh, that's Bible, that's old stuff. Who does that? That's for the fogies." No, you'd be surprised when you put the Word of God in young people's hands. They have a lot to say. They have a lot to say, especially if you're asking the question of see, judge, act, or see, discern, act. What are they seeing that maybe they didn't see before through the filters of the gospel values? I mentioned here that on a regular basis, when these young people, see a post, you got 4 million chatting about it. So there's something about peer networks, young people talking to young people, reacting to this theological reflection thread among them that spreads like wildfire. I mentioned we proclaim the good news of Jesus, aquí y ahora, here and now. Again, it's not about hearkening back to the past. It's about looking to our, roots and traditions, but with a sense of how is God calling us, the Spirit of God calling us to bring change, especially where there is injustice, where there are barriers against people, seeing their dignity and acting and setting goals from that. A couple of values that definitely identify us, and this will make sense as I tell you more stories about some of the young people we have worked with. We foster healthy human growth. So a lot of what drew me as a young adult, as a young Latino, by the way, when I first met Fe Vida in 1998, is, wait a minute, these people are talking about sexuality. These people are talking about human growth. These people are talking about parent dynamics. These people are talking about adulting 101. Who does that in a ministry context? Well, the Lasallians do, right? That is so de La Salle. You cannot evangelize unless you attend to human needs and challenges and gifts. And so that is one of the things that's a running thread throughout when we work with young people. We engage youth as protagonists. So we're not talking heads in front of the room, wagging fingers, telling them what to do. We provide interactive learning experiences, similar to what you said, Brother Dylan, about there in the Blackfeet Reservation. It's about immersion. It's about taking your sandals off, rolling up your sleeves, getting a little dirty, asking questions, challenging assumptions. And it's not us telling the young people what are the questions they should be asking. It's about listening and providing a space so that they can ask whatever. And then we go with them on that journey in terms of exploring answers, especially to some of their questions that are wrapped in immense pain and suffering. We nurture young people's sense of belonging. I thank Springtide for putting this on the radar of a lot of folks. Belonging precedes believing. Young people, especially in these current younger next generations, they suffer from a sense of distrust, suffer from a sense of alienation. And that gets in the way of, just listening, like many of us in the older generations. If an authority, someone is preaching from the pulpit, well, just because they are the preacher, the pastor, the teacher, the principal, we naturally will believe whatever they say. Well, Springtide has pointed out this newer generation believes in relational authority. They have to have some sense that there's a tie, a connection, a trusted connection before they will even listen to you. We also look closely at family. the first formators of our young people are the families. And my own Buttermere experience, by the way, especially in year 2, I really got a sensibility that De La Salle and the First Brothers had a keen sense of what was happening in the home and how can the educational system supplement, provide support, better parenting, better, relationships at home. And so we look at that carefully. And lastly, training mentors. Young people need adults that they can trust, right? And I know that the brothers work on conveying that in the schools, and we try to train not just teens and young adults, but who are the folks who want to work with them, and what are the things that would equip them to be those safe, caring adults that young people need. Next slide, please. So one of the things, talking about the social realities, what are young people seeing and telling us is important to them, and is a periphery in the sense that people don't talk about this, right? And therefore, a lot of young people fall through the cracks. Well, specifically, 9 out of 10 Latinos under 18, guess what? Were born in the US. This is their home. This is their country. And predominantly speak English. The reason I mention that is because we will go into a parish and the pastor will say, wait a minute. You want to talk about their country of origin and their culture and their parents? Hello, they were born in the US. They speak English. Why should we be attending to those matters? So it's a way of how funny that little fact serves in some ways as a tactic to invisibilize the roots, the origins, and especially the connection with their parents. Half of that 94% have at least one immigrant parent in the home. So this whole connection to migration, obviously some are third generation, fourth generation. So, maybe they don't have an immigrant parent, but the point is, especially among those who are second generation because they were born here in the US, that whole connection with migration is still alive and well. And if you know about the current political climate, oh my God, the anxiety in the community, in families. And maybe I was born in the US, but first of all, if you get stopped by the police and you look a certain way and you maybe sound a certain way and you're in a particular neighborhood, they're not going to say, oh, you were born in the US, you get a pass. I mean, people get lumped together all the time. And with all this talk of mass deportation and, using law enforcement to police that, even those who are US born have tremendous anxiety. And so migration is something that is an issue that doesn't get talked about often because there's, we'll talk a little bit with some of the stories. There's a lot of shame, but also a lot of target on people's backs because of it. And lastly, I just thought it's important, De La Salle for me focus on the poor, the children of the poor, the children of the working class. And it just strikes me, a lot of these teenagers, when they come to this program on the Lewis campus, engaging stories for juniors and seniors in high school, they are already earning money to help support the family. They have a job and they're in high school and they're usually in public schools, which, if you've seen documentaries, do not necessarily bet or bank on these teens graduating from high school. Not all of them do. The educational system, especially in most public school systems in major cities, is really struggling to help support kids. And therefore, by the way, it has consequences in terms of the jobs that they can apply for. I loved that fact that I learned about De La Salle. He was concerned. How are we preparing them so that they have jobs that bring in a living wage and help to, raise the family from the misery they're living in poverty? Next slide, please. So one thing that I want to focus on here in terms of Leaven is Fabi has shown a light on acculturation processes, right? You might not even think about this, but think of this particular grid. The vertical is about do you have at the top frequent or intentional, meaning you seek out contact with the mainstream culture? And the bottom part of that vertical is you actually have little interaction, or you go out of your way to avoid, right, for different reasons, interaction with mainstream culture. The horizontal goes from, little interaction with the culture of your home, of your origin. Like in this case, if someone is an immigrant from Venezuela, you don't talk about Venezuela, you don't look up Venezuela, you avoid any reference to Venezuela in social media, and you definitely don't express Venezuela in your daily interactions. To the other end, which is you stay in touch and you talk about it. And so you'll notice there's a result here that there are 4 different kinds of acculturations, right? And there are surveys that are out there. They can ask you in 5 questions and you can land. Are you mostly trying to assimilate, which is you're trying to leave Venezuela behind, but really, really get to know U.S. culture, the mainstream as it's presented, and you're trying to speak English, not speak it with an accent, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe I'm going to go diagonally across down to the bottom, maybe separation. Maybe you want to resist Yankee imperialism. Maybe you want to resist the fact that you can see that people are trying, even the pastor is trying to get you to forget your Spanish, forget Venezuela, for the sake of, even some parents are saying, for the sake of your upward mobility in the U.S. culture and doing well at school, please don't speak Spanish. Speak English, practice it so that you don't get targeted the way I am. There's some parents who say, no, forget that. I need you to maintain your Spanish. I need you not to forget your Venezuelan identity. I need you to press against colonization. Now, the dream of a lot of parents who are immigrants who come to the U.S. is that upper right quadrant, which is biculturalism, that you can be both Venezuelan and belong to the U.S., that you can speak English and Spanish, that you can celebrate, the things that we celebrate culturally as Catholics in Venezuela, but also what we do here, especially from an Irish Catholic imprint that has been so laid down as a default, especially in New England and other parts, the German Catholics in the Midwest. But then I want to point out the last quadrant here, which is marginalization. And that's where increasingly we're seeing a lot of young people, which is what? I don't identify with the country of my parents, especially because they don't talk about it. And I definitely don't fit into U.S. culture, into mainstream culture. Okay, next slide. I'm going to skip this one. This talks about how parents and kids can have different acculturation processes, and that can create a lot of dissonance within the family. Next slide. And so basically what we have figured out is that it has generated very different realities among teens and young adults. You've got the immigrant workers. Those are kids who are immigrants, right? They just arrived in the U.S. and they tend to live in that world of separation. It's what they know, right? Especially when no one else, the mainstream culture doesn't want to interact with them. And you find them in silos, talking among each other, maintaining their Spanish, etc. You've got I'm going to go down to the mainstream movers. Those are the assimilationists, right? If you knew some of my story, I very much identify with that, but that's a whole nother conversation for when we get to have beer or tea with Brother Dylan and say jokes around the fire. The high risk, those are the ones who are marginalized. Those are the ones who feel rejected by their mother culture, but also by mainstream culture. And lastly, the identity seekers. You might think, oh, the poor dears, but you know what? Those are the ones who are genuinely saying, you know what? I am bicultural, bilingual, but there's no home for me because I'm being pulled from each side as if, well, if you're with them, you can't be with us. If you're with us, you can't be with them. Next slide. So what I'd like to do is here at FABE that we've realized that they have different needs. And so we have specified, different emphases on spiritual life, intellectual development, affective maturity. What does that look like? The acquisition of human values, and also what percentage of Hispanic young adults and also Hispanic teens increasingly fall under these categories. Because again, I think one of the lessons learned is it's not cookie cutter, especially if you have different acculturation processes and parents who have that also have different acculturation processes. It means ministry needs to be differentiated. Next slide, please. So I will tell you a few quick stories. My reflection, I've just summarized it here. There is so much to challenge assumptions, so much to inspire, so much to discern, innovate, celebrate. This is a field full of change. So leavening means change. And what we find is that pastors and others is not so much that they're racist. It's that, oh my God, you're going to give me more work to do. Oh my goodness, I just finally got this settled. And now you're going to upend it and tell me that I need to learn something new? Yes. And lastly, the learning is you've got to see Brother Michael Fehrenbach's, the visitor of the Midwest District, his posting this past Monday, the 17th of February. And its title, and which is why I went to it right on my email, "Where's your ass?" He's quoting actually Daniel Berrigan, who says most people, when they ask, where's your faith? Where is it seated? They think about it in the head, it's an idea. They think about it in the heart, it's a feeling. But what Brother Michael is emphasizing, faith is a verb. And the as in the sense of where is it seated in terms of your action? Where are your commitments? How do you live that out on a daily basis? Next slide. So I'm just going to end real quick with 3 stories. The first one is a fellow who actually was raised in LA, high risk, very much feeling marginalized, that he didn't belong either to his Mexican immigrant roots, because for many different reasons. But then the other thing is he dropped out of school. So guess what? He found a home of belonging among gangs. But then he had an experience, an encounter with Christ, and then he ended up at a program at Fe Vida. And, the young people around him did not like the fact that he was completely filled with tattoos, and that he was obviously someone who belonged to a gang, and there was the drug addiction involved. But all of a sudden, when we have a talent show, he rapped. And these were his own raps, his own music, and the crowd went wild. Now, I got to tell you, the reason he had enough guts to do that is because he came with a priest who knew about homeboy industries and that sort of thing. You have a gift from the Spirit. You got to let it out. Otherwise, you're always going to be on the margin. And I'm not saying that Fe Vida takes credit, but we provided a space where this young person made a huge decision that totally transformed his life. He's gone on to establish a ministry in Little Rock, Arkansas, precisely for gangbangers and those who are suffering addiction. And he's working on being a social worker. And so it's an amazing story. Next slide. The next one is someone who's an immigrant young person. And this person is outside in the shadows of Washington, D.C. And one of the things that they do when they come to Lewis University, the teens, is that in the morning they do service project. And this fellow was very quiet. Part of it is barriers of color. Most of these young people are lighter skinned. This fellow is darker skinned. But what was amazing in terms of a breakthrough for him is that he was assigned the service of serving at a food pantry in Joliet in an African-American community. And what's powerful there is that he then expressed that this was a breakthrough because he was wrapped in the shame of the fact that his family depended on a food pantry back home. So he goes back home saying, you know what? I got to break the silence. I got to break the shame. And he helped the group to organize what? Getting the parish to establish a food pantry to deal with the food desert situation for the community. Boom. Next slide. The last one is that one of the hardest conversations that these young people are saying that they can't have is asking the parents to tell them their migration story. And yet this young lady in engaging stories realized, whoa, we got immigrants, they got stories. My dad has never told me his story of how he crossed over as a young person, undocumented. And so one of the challenges is that she came back as a leader the next year and invited her father to come and tell the story in front of everybody. Of course, they talked about it at home first. But the powerful thing is that she's at St. Louis University. She's done mission trips to the border with Jesuits, and it has changed her life. And it's all because she finally had the skills on how do you interview a parent who doesn't want to talk about that stuff, but yet it's so important for her. And she's decided also to get into the field of social work and work with young people. So basically, what I want to say, you know, Levin, you never know. It's like the movie Ratatouille. God will call what the world rejects, God could use powerfully in order to truly bring about change and grace. Thank you.
Wow, amazing, Juan and Brother Dylan. Thank you for those very different examples of the way that Lasallians are being catalysts on the peripheries today. It makes me realize in ways perhaps that I haven't realized before that there is so much expertise among the educators within our Lasallian network who are leveraging that expertise to address the signs of the times, the location and the context of where they're serving, and they're adapting and adjusting in order to serve that population, no matter how diverse it is. So you're about creating spaces, you're creating experiences, and you're really doing it in unique ways. I just want to thank the handful of you that have posted some comments in the chat this evening. Brother George mentioning that Levin touches everything small and large, and that it is within its reach. And he offers three different ways that we can think about leavening, how it stretches our capacities. It's real good for others, and it makes significant worthwhile growth in larger significant areas. And Rita as well. Leaven is presence. The evidence of leaven is when the bread rises. You can't find the leaven and separate it from the bread. Leaven makes the whole loaf rise from within, and that is what we must do. We need to be in the middle so that it all rises together. Really good observations, and there's others there in the chat as well. We don't have a time for any kind of thorough discussion. If anything, my hope is that we have provoked you to do a couple of things. One, to look around your geographic context and look for the peripheries that are hiding in plain sight, so to speak, right? What are those places? Who are those people that we can reach out to kind of right away? We don't need to put together a big plan. We don't need to spend a lot of time thinking about it. But what are the immediate kinds of action that we can take right now in our own particular context? Doesn't mean we have to found a ministry. Doesn't mean we need to do anything that's too extensive. We can get involved in other ministries that are doing this leavening work. So if you're interested in learning more about what it means to come and see, Dylan and the team at De La Salle Blackfeet would be more than welcome to invite you into an immersive experience to see what it is they do. And I know Juan and the team at Fea Vita would be happy to involve you in any number of the projects that they are working on these days. And Lois, yes, thank you. Working with Lasallian Women of Hope. It's another way to get involved. So there are so many different resources within our Lasallian network that we can take advantage of. It's just a matter of taking that first step, moving forward in that direction. We are about out of time, so I'm going to turn it back over to you, Sarah, before everybody jumps off the call to go have dinner.
Great. Well, I want to just offer my thanks to Kurt, Juan, and Brother Dylan for sharing your lived experience, insight, and expressions of the leavening movement with us. It's challenging, thought-provoking, and a call to action for us to be attentive to within our Lasallian educational communities. We're so grateful for each of you, the service and leadership that you provide our charism and mission, and we're very appreciative of your time today. So thank you to each of you. As we look ahead, please mark your calendar for the next webinar in our series that will be held on Tuesday, March 18th at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. We'll be joined by Brother Michael French and Brother Michael Phipps, and they will share with us about theological reflection and the educator's journey to transformation, apt for this 2025 year of Lasallian spirituality. If you have any topics and ideas for future webinars, please let us know, and we'd love to hear from you. Again, thank you for joining us this afternoon and evening, and thank you for your dedication and service of our Lasallian mission. Live Jesus in our hearts forever.